Imagine standing right in the middle of Times Square. Or, maybe the busiest intersection in Tokyo.
Right, just shoulder to shoulder with people.
Exactly. Or the dense, chaotic heart of Karachi. You are completely surrounded by hundreds of thousands of people.
Yeah.
You're physically bumping into humanity. Yet, according to a mathematical equation written centuries ago, in that exact moment, surrounded by a sea of faces, you might actually be the most isolated, utterly abandoned orphan on the face of the earth.
Oh, wow. That is a heavy image.
It is, right? Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today, we are taking on a genuinely massive architectural blueprint for human society. We are acting as the lead script writers for the Tolu Islam Digital Archive, and our specific mission today is to synthesize the insights from Lecture 815 by Allama Parwez.
And I gotta say, it is a deeply provocative text. Parwez is tackling Surah An-Nahl, Ayats 84 through 90. And he's basically doing it with a scalpel.
Yeah, and we all know Ayat 90. I mean, if you spend any time around the community, you know it as the Friday sermon sign-off.
Oh, absolutely. The classic ending.
Right. The imam recites it, the congregation shifts, people check their watches, and everyone gets ready to line up for prayer.
Yeah, it's become this sort of ritualistic buzzer.
Exactly. But Parwez pulls this verse entirely out of that passive rhythmic context. He recasts it as a literal formula for macroeconomics. He actually calls it the mathematical equation for civilization.
Which is such a brilliant reframe.
It really is. We are completely leaving behind the theological discussions about, the signs of nature, looking at the stars and the trees, and we are diving straight into the laws of the street.
Yeah.
So, okay, let's unpack this.
Yeah, let's do it.
How do we translate ancient verses into a modern grand manifesto of social conduct?
Well, it's important to frame exactly how we're approaching this today because Parwez's analysis is intensely sociological.
Right.
He takes a long, hard look at the foundational systems that run our modern world, specifically capitalism and state socialism, and he dismantles both of them piece by piece.
And we should probably pause here for a crucial impartiality note.
Yes, definitely. As hosts, we really need to make it clear that we are impartially reporting Parwez's interpretations of this Quranic economic system. We aren't endorsing any specific political or economic ideology here.
Right, we're not taking sides on the left or the right.
Exactly. The source material contains some really strong critiques of these global systems, and our goal is just to help you, the listener, understand his highly provocative architectural blueprint for society, exactly as he laid it out.
We are just reading the blueprint.
Just reading the blueprints, yeah.
And to build this grand manifesto, Parwez argues you first have to basically clear the lot. You have to tear down the false idols.
Right.
He frames this whole discussion around two contrasting concepts. There's Iman bil Haq, which is true belief, and then Iman bil Batil, which is false belief. But he isn't talking about believing in ghosts or mythology here.
No, not at all.
He ties these concepts entirely to economics and the concept of ownership.
Which is a profound paradigm shift right out of the gate. For Parwez, the ultimate Iman bil Batil, the foundational false belief, is this deeply ingrained human assumption that our skills, our intellect, the hours we clock in at work, and the resulting wealth we generate from those things are our absolute personal property.
Wait, let me stop you right there, because that is the bedrock of modern life.
Oh, absolutely.
I mean, if I go to medical school for 10 years, rack up debt, study all night, and finally become a surgeon, the money I make from operating on people is mine. I earned it.
That's the narrative, yeah?
My intellect, my steady hands, my sacrifice. Are you saying Parwez views that very assumption as a false idol?
He views it as the ultimate illusion.
Wow.
Parwez argues that your steady hands, your intellect, the very oxygen you breathed while studying, and the societal infrastructure that allowed a medical school to even exist, none of that was created by you.
That makes sense, yeah.
It is all a pre-existing trust.
Yeah.
Everything belongs to the divine. Humans are merely trustees.
Okay, I see where he's going.
So the moment you claim absolute sovereign ownership over the wealth you extract from that trust, you have essentially stepped into Iman bil Batil. You've embraced the false belief.
But that immediately puts him on a huge collision course with capitalism.
Oh, a massive collision course.
Because the entire capitalist engine runs on the sanctity of private property. If I own the capital, it's mine to do with as I please.
Exactly. And this is where his critique of capitalism really sharpens. He zeroes in on the concept of riba.
Riba, okay.
Now, traditionally, you hear riba and you think interest on a bank loan.
Right. You lend someone $100, you ask for 110 back. That's the classical definition.
Yeah, but Parwez broadens riba into this massive systemic critique. He defines it as any unearned income system where capital merely breeds more capital, which allows those with wealth to exploit the labor and circumstances of others without contributing equitable, tangible value.
So he's going way beyond just banking.
Way beyond.
In his framework, riba could be like a private equity firm buying up single-family homes, doing zero actual labor to improve them, and then jacking up the rent by 50% just because they cornered the market and people need a place to live.
That is a perfect modern application of his theory.
So the capital is just breeding capital.
Exactly. In that scenario, the wealth multiplies simply because it exists in a concentrated pool, not because the owner is laboring alongside the worker.
Right, the renters working multiple jobs are just feeding the machine.
Yeah. To Parwez, that system inherently violates the principle that all resources on Earth are a universal trust meant for the nourishment of humanity. It turns the trust into a weapon for hoarding.
But here is where someone listening might jump in and say, okay, so Parwez is a Marxist. He wants the state to take over the private equity firms, take over the hospitals, take over the factories, and distribute everything equally.
Right, that's the natural jump people make.
But he doesn't say that at all. In fact, he rips into state socialism and communism just as brutally.
He really does, because to him, moving from capitalism to state socialism is just trading one false idol for another.
Yeah.
You aren't fixing the root problem. You are just changing the address of the hoarder from a Wall Street boardroom to a government bureaucracy.
There is an analogy in the text that Parwez uses for state socialism that is just brilliant. He says it is like putting a starving lion in a cage.
It captures the psychological toll perfectly.
Think about the mechanics of that. You take this magnificent beast, an apex predator, and you put it behind bars. Then you stand outside the cage holding a piece of meat. Because you completely control that lion's access to survival, you can dictate its entire reality. You can make that lion jump through a hoop. You can make it balance on a ball.
Yeah, it has no choice.
The lion might roar in absolute frustration inside. Its fundamental nature is being suppressed. But it is utterly subservient to you because you hold the food.
Right.
Parwez argues that when the state takes total control over the means of production, it turns citizens into caged lions.
They are fed, perhaps. Their basic caloric needs might be met by the state quota.
Sure.
But they are entirely dependent subjects. They are stripped of their agency, their creative friction, their ability to freely interact with universal trust. They are forced to comply with a handful of state bureaucrats.
So what does this all mean for the listener? I mean, if both total privatization and total state control are flawed in this view, what is the third option? Because Parwez essentially views both systems as traps.
Right. Whether a billionaire tech CEO hoards the resources or a supreme leader of a vanguard party controls the resources, the human being at the bottom is still subservient to another human being for survival.
Exactly.
The resources are still not being treated as a universal trust. They are being used as leverage for power. So Parwez concludes that you cannot fix the economic imbalance without fixing the foundational power structure.
You can't just tweak the tax code.
No. Or write a new welfare policy. The third option requires a complete shift in how society defines authority and legislation.
And this brings us to a part of the text that honestly made me put my notes down and just stare at the wall for a minute.
Oh, the democracy critique.
Yes, we are talking about his view on modern democracy. Parwez presents this fascinating argument that blind adherence to Western-style democracy, specifically the idea that a majority vote can legislate absolutely anything, even overriding divine moral boundaries, is a modern form of shirk.
Idol worship.
Idol worship.
It is a staggering claim, but he traces it back through a very clear historical analogy in the text.
Let's hear it.
Think about the ancient era of ignorance. People would go to a riverbed, scoop up some clay, and use their own hands to sculpt an idol.
Right.
They would carve out its eyes, shape its shoulders, bake it in the sun, and place it on a pedestal. And then, kiddably, they would fall to their knees.
Yeah.
They would tremble in fear, begging this piece of baked mud for rain or for victory in battle. They became subservient to the very thing they manufactured.
It sounds absurd to the modern ear. I mean, you literally made the statue yesterday. You know it's just mud. Why are you acting like it controls your destiny?
But Parwez turns that exact critique on us. He argues that modern societies do the exact same thing with political leaders and unfettered legislatures.
Wow.
We sculpt them with our votes. We spend billions of dollars campaigning for them. We empower them. We put them on pedestals of immense authority. And then, once they are in the Senate or the Parliament, they create systems and laws that crush the everyday person.
They pass legislation that allows the massive economic exploitation we were just talking about. They legalize the hoarding.
And what is our reaction? We suffer under these systems, we get squeezed by inflation and stagnant wages, and we cry out to God about our helplessness.
Yeah.
We act as if we are the victims of some supreme, unchangeable force of nature, completely forgetting that we are the ones who sculpted the idol in the first place. We handed them the blank check of absolute legislative power.
He visualizes the ultimate consequence of this in a really theatrical way. He sets up this incredible scene on the Day of Judgment.
Yeah, what's fascinating here is Parwez notes that on the Day of Judgment, these idols and their followers will actually turn on each other.
You always hear about the Day of Judgment as this terrifying cosmic event, but Parwez frames it almost like a bitter post-election town hall meeting.
It's a profound psychological reading of the text. There is no solidarity in failure. The followers will look at the leaders they elected and say, "You misled us. You stood on the debate stage, you promised us prosperity, and you led our society into ruin."
And you'd think the leaders would cower, but they don't.
No, the leaders will reply, "You empowered us. We didn't have any inherent magical power. We were just ordinary people. You handed us the keys. You didn't even use your intellect to see the reality."
It is a brutal critique of societal abdication.
Exactly. By placing absolute, unchecked legislative power in the hands of fallible humans, a society is attempting to avoid the responsibility of adhering to a higher, immutable moral law.
Because it's easier to just vote for a guy who promises to fix everything than it is to build a society based on rigid principles of equity.
Right.
Now, I have to clarify something here, because I don't want you, the listener, to misunderstand his point. The source isn't against consultation.
Not at all.
Parwez explicitly states that the Quranic system mandates shura, which means mutual consultation. It is a strictly participatory model. Society must decide its affairs collectively.
There is no room for a dictator or a clerical ruling class. The distinction Parwez makes is about the scope of that consultation.
Okay, explain that distinction. How do you have absolute consultation without absolute legislative freedom?
Let's use an architectural metaphor. Imagine society is a house. Sure, the democratic consultation process is the freedom to design the interior.
Okay.
You can vote on what color to paint the walls, what furniture to buy, how to arrange the kitchen. You have total freedom to adapt to the changing needs of the family living inside. But you do not have the freedom to take a sledgehammer and knock down the load-bearing walls.
Because if you knock those down, the whole structure collapses, no matter what color the kitchen is.
Precisely. The divine boundaries, the strict prohibitions against economic hoarding, against exploitation, the mandates for universal equity, those are the load-bearing walls.
I see.
If a parliament takes a majority vote and decides to legalize a new form of complex financial exploitation that ruins the working class, they haven't just passed a new law. They have taken a sledgehammer to a load-bearing wall.
Wow.
Parwez argues that true shura operates vigorously within the immutable boundaries set by God. It is consultation to apply the principles, rather than having the absolute freedom to rewrite moral laws.
So let's say a society gets it wrong. A society decides they don't care about the blueprints, they vote to knock down the load-bearing walls.
Right.
They embrace the hoarding, they embrace the false idols. How does the universe react to that?
Well,
Does God just send a lightning bolt to strike the stock exchange?
no. Parwez says the universe operates on laws. It doesn't just send a lightning bolt, it creates a witness.
And this brings us to verse 89, and what Parwez calls the engine of reason. Let's focus on that verse for a minute. The text mentions that a Shahid, a witness, will be raised from every nation.
And again, Parwez forces us to completely reevaluate our definitions. He unpacks the engine of reason here.
Yeah, because when I hear witness, my mind immediately goes to a courtroom. You know, a person sitting in the witness box, swearing on a book, giving a verbal account of a crime.
Right, or maybe a prophet who comes down to warn the people. But Parwez says the witness is not just a person standing at a podium taking notes.
Right.
According to Parwez, every era has a witness. It is the living results of their own social policies.
The living results. That is wild.
This is the law of cause and effect applied to sociology on a massive scale. If a society builds its house by knocking down the load-bearing walls of equity, if it's crumbling, suffering from inequality, or tearing itself apart, that very decay is the witness testifying against the logic of that society.
Here's where it gets really interesting. I usually think of a witness as an individual. But Parwez is saying the Ummah, the Muslim community, was originally designed to be an international witness.
Yes. The community was meant to be a global guardian. It wasn't designed so people could isolate themselves in mosques and ignore the world.
Right.
If oppression is happening anywhere in the world, this community is supposed to be the witness that steps in to stop the oppressor and lift up the oppressed.
So they were supposed to be the friction against tyranny.
Exactly. And if they fail to do this, they lose their standing and face global disgrace. Which, Parwez argues, is exactly what has happened.
Because they abandoned this role of global guardianship.
Yeah, they retreated into empty rituals and allowed corrupt systems to rule over them, so they abdicated their responsibility to the engine of reason.
So to avoid this societal decay and actually become a proper guardian, a society needs a blueprint.
Absolutely.
That brings us to the core of the deep dive today, the grand manifesto of social conduct.
This is where we get into verse 90.
Right. We are doing a linguistic deep dive now. Introduce the mathematical equation for civilization from verse 90. God commands Adl and Ihsan.
Now, these are two words that anyone familiar with the text has heard 1,000 times. But Parwez challenges us to redefine these terms based strictly on his linguistic deep dive.
Let's start with Adl. Usually, if you open a translation, Adl simply says justice.
Right.
And when we think of justice, we think of a judge in a courtroom, someone stole a car, they go to prison. It's reactionary. But here it is, the bedrock of symmetry.
Symmetry is the perfect word for it. Parwez defines Adl as ensuring everyone gets exactly what they are due to maintain the balance of the social structure.
But to achieve that symmetry, Parwez notes that we have to shatter a very stubborn religious paradigm.
He completely rejects the traditional religious division of the rights of God versus the rights of man.
Yeah, because usually people put prayers in the God box and charity in the man box.
Exactly. To him, all rights belong to God. And fulfilling human needs is fulfilling God's rights. You cannot separate them. You cannot be in a state of Adl with God while your neighbor is starving.
Okay, so if Adl is the baseline symmetry, what is Ihsan? Because Ihsan is usually translated as being nice or doing a favor.
And Parwez redefines it as the social safety net. If someone works hard, but due to natural lack of ability or circumstance, falls behind, Ihsan is society stepping in to make up the deficit. It restores the beauty and balance of the system.
Let me use an analogy here to really visualize this. Adl is building the house perfectly level. The geometry is flawless. But if a storm damages a pillar, Ihsan is the community rushing in to reinforce it so the whole structure doesn't collapse.
That is a phenomenal visualization. And crucially, as the text notes, when society does this, the person receiving help shouldn't feel the crushing weight of a favor.
Yes, this is so vital. In our current society, charity often comes with a toxic power dynamic.
Oh, entirely. The billionaire gives away a fraction of his wealth, gets his name on a hospital, and the people receiving care are expected to feel endlessly indebted.
But Parwez points out that true Ihsan completely removes that dynamic. It's just the society doing its duty to maintain symmetry. There is no debt of gratitude owed because the resources belong to the divine trust in the first place.
Exactly. The billionaire was just holding them.
So to execute this mathematical equation, you have to start somewhere. You start with the pigs closest to you.
Right. Which brings us to the next part of verse 90. It continues with giving to Zil-Qurba, which translates to those close to you or your relatives.
If you were in a 7th century tribal society, that makes obvious sense. Look after your uncle, your cousin. But Parwez views society as concentric circles.
You start by securing those nearest to you, effectively building the protective walls of a healthy society. If everyone does this, the walls interlock, leaving no one vulnerable.
But what happens when those walls break down? The text talks about the yatim, the orphan, but it defines it in a really haunting way.
It's a powerful sociological observation. Parwez explains that in a flawed capitalist society, an orphan isn't just a child without parents.
Right.
You can be standing in the middle of a bustling city of millions like Lahore or Karachi or New York and feel utterly, completely alone.
You're dodging people on the sidewalk, but you are functionally invisible.
Exactly. If a disaster strikes you, you lose your job, you get sick, and no one steps in to help, you are a yatim in the eyes of social physics.
A sociological orphan.
The isolation of modern society is the ultimate failure of Ihsan.
So what drives a society to become so isolated and selfish? What causes the interlocking walls to crumble? The verse answers this by detailing the 3 destructive forces that ruin civilization. The verse forbids Fahsha, Munkar, and Baghy.
Let's do a linguistic deep dive into these because Parwez applies a strict socioeconomic lens here. Take Fahsha, often translated as obscenity.
Right, people think of inappropriate clothing or illicit behavior.
But the historical Arab context from the text is totally different. The absolute worst, most shameful trait to the ancient Arabs was miserliness, hoarding wealth while others starved.
Because in a desert, hoarding means death for someone else.
Exactly. Fahsha is hoarding disguised as a cultural norm. That massive wealth disparity is the true obscenity.
And then we have Munkar. The text defines this as the intellectual gymnastics and justificatory reasons people use to defend their hoarding.
Because people need a narrative to make themselves the hero.
Let me role play this for a second. I earned it. I'm creating jobs. I have to secure my kids' future. The free market rewards innovation.
That entire speech is Munkar in action. It's the elaborate rationalization of a fundamentally unbalanced system. And when Fahsha is protected by Munkar, it leads to Baghy.
Baghy. Social physics.
This is transgression. In the realm of social physics, this is the overstepping of boundaries.
How does that work?
Well, when individuals hoard resources, they create extreme pressure in the lower classes. They are squeezing the bottom 99% into a smaller economic box.
Like compressing a gas in a closed container.
Exactly. This overstepping leads to friction, heat, and eventual social combustion revolutions, riots.
The container explodes.
The container explodes. What's fascinating here is Parwez notes that the Quran operates as an advanced text of human psychology here.
Yeah, because he digs into the psychology of the hoarder with this disease called takathur, the urge to multiply wealth.
Parwez describes it as an inner vacuum, a vacuum in his own self.
It's like a false thirst. You can drink oceans of wealth, but the vacuum remains because human fulfillment only comes from universal love and helping others, not from hoarding.
And to cure that sickness, we can contrast the psychological disease of the hoarder with Parwez's vision of the Quranic Jannah, or heaven.
I love this part. This historical anecdote from the text about the White Palace of Khosrow. During the time of Umar, when Sa'd bin Abi Waqqas conquered the White Palace, the absolute pinnacle of worldly wealth, the Muslims were astounded by the luxury.
Right, they had never seen anything like it.
But Parwez points out a radical idea. The Quran's depiction of Jannah features these exact same luxuries: silk, pearls, flowing drinks.
But here's the massive difference. In this vision of heaven, there are no VIP sections.
Yeah.
Whether you get basic bread and lentils or silk and pearls, everyone gets it equally. It is the ultimate classless society.
So if the society can afford silk, the street sweeper wears silk alongside the doctor.
Exactly. It's an environment where the inner vacuum is finally filled because the friction of inequality is gone.
Wow. Bringing it all back to you, the listener, how do we apply this massive sociological blueprint to our understanding of the world today?
It requires a lot of reflection.
Let's summarize the journey. We've moved from the false idols of unbridled capitalism and state control. We've witnessed the testimony of societal decay through the engine of reason. We redefined justice as symmetry and the social safety net as the community rushing in without power dynamics.
And we explore the social physics that leads to civilization's combustion when hoarding is justified.
We've laid down the Grand Manifesto of Justice. In Lecture 915, covering Ayat 9193, we will explore the sanctity of contracts, why a society that breaks its word, even for strategic advantage, is a society that is tearing its own fabric apart like a woman unraveling her own yarn.
Until then, think about your own community right now. If your society were put on trial today, what exact witness would the engine of reason call to the stand to testify about the state of your social safety net?
Thank you for joining us on this deep dive. Keep questioning the world around you, and we will catch you next time.